in Perth. We've got some people in Perth, so we welcome them. We've got some New Zealanders, we've got Canberrians, we've got Queenslanders, and here we are with a few of us down in the southern tip of Tasmania. So we're across Australasia, and it's wonderful that you are able to be with us tonight once again. We've got some very special guests, as we always have. Wonderful guests. I was actually interviewed today by Barry from Bathsheba Vision about the story of SCAFI. I won't share that tonight, but it's an amazing story, and there's more to come. So at this stage, I just want to open to our co-founder, Rabbi Rosenberg, to give us a welcoming message as we come to introduce our friends. Over to you, Rabbi.
Thanks very much, John. I didn't realise it's 42 programs. I think we can gain inspiration from the fact that there were 42 journeys that are enumerated in the Torah, that the Israelites journeyed from Egypt to the Promised Land, and indeed, this is actually next week's Torah reading. It's called Matus Maso, the Journeys of the Jewish People. Certainly good to be back. I've just returned from New York for a wonderful visit to my children and grandchildren, which I'm sure all of you understand is very special and meaningful. I do like to begin with a reflection from our Jewish calendar, and today is what was a fast day. It was the 17th day of Tammuz, and it heralds in a period in our calendar which is called the 3 weeks. Probably best described as a period of national mourning of the destruction of the temples, and which took place on the 9th of Av. First temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in the 400 before the Common Era, and the second temple by the Romans near 70 AD. But we begin the mourning period 3 weeks prior, because that's when the walls were breached, the walls of Jerusalem were breached by the Romans before they destroyed the second temple. The rabbis in their wisdom always looked at the spiritual cause of the destruction. They said it was never about the Romans, the Babylonians. The destruction was within, and that enabled Judea to be conquered. And at that time they identified the lack of unity amongst people, amongst themselves. They identified the immorality that was occurring, and they also recognized and highlighted the breach that occurred between the Jewish people and Hashem. And they said rectify these causes and help rebuild the temple. Certainly timely messages for all of us to rectify our relationships between man and between our fellow man, and to rectify relationships between the Almighty. I want to share with you a very moving yet tragic story that occurred in Gaza, from which we can gain inspiration. It occurred in December the 15th, and probably one of the most difficult episodes of this war, which we hope is coming to a conclusion in coming weeks and months. 3 of the hostages that were abducted on October 7th, members of the IDF, Alon Shamriz, Shamar et Al-Kar, and Yotam Chaim, managed to free themselves from their abductors. They came into a courtyard. They were actually virtually took their clothes off, and called out in Hebrew that They were Jews, they were Israelis, because they saw the Israeli troops in the area. And tragically, in the fog of war, they were killed by their own people, shot and killed by the IDF. One can certainly imagine one can understand the terrible tragedy, particularly of such a nature. Finally, these boys are free, only to be shot by their own troops. One can understand the dismay on behalf of the troops, the heartbreak really of all the Jewish people at that time. And it goes without saying, the parents waiting weeks and months, perhaps their children are alive, and here only to find these three boys had escaped, and then to be tragically shot by friendly fire. And one of the boys' mothers, Yotam's mother, her name was Irit Chaim, sensitive woman who clearly understood the pain that brigade, members of that brigade were going through, and she wrote them this letter, and let me share with you just one or two lines. When she wrote, "I am Yotam's mother, and I want to tell you that I love you very much, and I hug you here from afar. And I know that everything that has happened is absolutely not your fault, and nobody's fault except that of Hamas. May their memory be erased. I want you to look after yourselves. I want you to think all the time that you are doing the best thing for Israel and the world. We all need you, and next time don't hesitate for a second if you see terrorists." And she says, "I forgive you." And she continues, "At the first opportunity, you are invited to come to our home, and I want to see you with my own eyes, and I want to hug you. I want to hug you." This is how she concludes the letter. I'm not sure how many of the members of that brigade came, but what I have found out is a week or two later she did get a knock on the door, and she invited the young man in, and he told her the following story. He had read her letter. He was not in that brigade, but 15 years prior he was in a IDF patrol, and he accidentally, through friendly fire, shot a colleague. And this episode has haunted him, and he had seen psychiatrists for many, many years, and nothing could give him comfort, and in fact he had secluded himself in his home. And he said to Rit, after reading your letter, I found forgiveness. I found healing, and this was actually the first time I was able to step out of my own home, and I think after reading your letter, I am now slowly able to re-engage once again in the world. I thank God none of us here have to endure such challenges, but I think certainly, particularly with the difficult situation in Israel, let us all reach out to a friend who we've been estranged from. There have been some misunderstandings. Let us seek forgiveness. But at very least, reach out to somebody and do some good. And I think this will bring healing, not only to ourselves, but really to all of humanity. And please God, this will bring about the coming of the Messiah and the building of the third temple. John.
Thank you, Rabbi. As always, a moving story, and the power of forgiveness. We could spend the rest of the night talking about that, because it is one of the most challenging things as we as human beings have to face. But rather than go in that direction tonight, I must get on to our guest speakers, and it's with pleasure that I introduce one of our committee meetings, one of the committee members who has been there from the start, been a supporter from the start, from the first meeting, David Jack, and we just want to say thank you, David, for all the work you do, putting the music together, all the videos that we've travelled the country doing with Amir and many others, many of the conferences that we've done together, the live events. And you have a special guest, Professor Ghil'ad Zuckermann, and please, over to you to introduce him.
Thank you, John. Yes, well, Ghil'ad and I go back about 10 years or so in the early days of tracking with the William Cooper story. William Cooper was an Aboriginal activist in the 1930s, and as a Christian man stood up in defence of the Jewish people when in a time in Australia when he had no rights as a person, which was just incredible. He would stand up for someone halfway around the world. And in terms of, well, the Germans had started their Holocaust thing. It was Kristallnacht in 1938, and he saw this in the paper. And I think that he thought, oh my goodness, here they come again, because he had lost a son on the Western Front in 1917. And so I think this was part of the motivation for him to stand up. So not many places correlate those 2 points in writing, but I think that's an important point for his rise of his activism. An amazing man. So yeah, that we were tracking with his grandson, Uncle Boydie, who's still 95 or 6 at the moment, which is just extraordinary. He's still around, but he's done all that he can do in terms of conveying the William Cooper story and seeing a couple of unfinished parts of his grandfather's business completed in England and in Germany. So I've been part of that. So it's a whole other story for another night. But Ghil'ad, my goodness, how do I introduce you? You've got pages and pages on your CV. You're a professor of linguistics in Adelaide University, and you hold a doctorate from Oxford University. Have you got a second doctorate from Cambridge?
Yes, it's a paradox.
Okay. Okay. You're a holder of a paradox. Well, you're a warrior for reclaiming, reviving, and waking up the indigenous languages in such countries as Taiwan, the old Formosa, and Australia. Of course, there has been a linguicide, in your words, of indigenous languages. And that was a conscious government policy in Australia to wipe out languages and in effect wipe away Aboriginality in so many ways. So Ghil'ad is also a founder of Revivalistics, a new global transdisciplinary field of inquiry surrounding language reclamation, revitalisation, and reinvigoration. And more locally, in 2011, he launched with the Barngala Aboriginal community on Eyre Peninsula, across from Adelaide, in South Australia, the reclamation of their language. So I know Ghil'ad sits with the people in these areas. The Lutherans had a lot to do with recording, didn't they, the languages? Because up until this point, of course, no Aboriginal languages were written. You can expand on what you want to in there, but that's amazing for the Lutherans to have got down there as missionaries and started to note these languages. He's an adjunct professor in the Institute of Positive Psychology and Education, Australian Catholic University. And we could go on, couldn't we? But let's keep it focused for tonight. And let's perhaps even look at the parallel between the Hebrew and the Jewish people in Israel in terms of the language there. The old Hebrew stopped in about 200 AD, didn't it, Ghil'ad? And then was revitalized in the 18 or 1900s, I think, as the new Hebrew. And so, I mean, the continuity in there, of course, was the written language, unlike the Aboriginal story, which had no background in being written. So, yeah, look, let's hand over to you, Ghil'ad, and you take it where you want to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I would like to thank John and Rabbi Riesenberg and It's a great pleasure, and you're very right to pinpoint several Christian-Jewish collaborations that this enterprise, Revivalistics, and this is the title of a book that I published with Oxford University Press, Revivalistics, which might echo some religious connotations, but what I mean by revivalistics is the science of language revival. It has a lot to do with Jews and Christians coming together. So let me explain what I mean. Firstly, Clamor Wilhelm Schumann, who wrote down a dictionary in 1844 in Port Lincoln, also known as Gallignala. This is in Eyre Peninsula in Australia Australis, which is South Australia. As you all know, Australia in Latin means south. So I live in the south of the south, so Australia Australis. Clamor Wilhelm Schumann wrote this dictionary of the Bangla Aboriginal language for his own religious Lutheran reasons. He, as opposed to Anglican missionaries, wanted to Christianize the heathens, in quotation marks, using the target language, their own language. Whereas, as you know, Anglicans, they usually just teach the heathens, in quotation marks, English, and then they do the missionary activities in English. Now, it's very, very interesting because 180 years later, I, together with the Bangla Aboriginal people, use this dictionary written for Lutheranization for Aboriginalization. And let me explain, because when he wrote down the dictionary, he actually included many sacred, spiritual, religious words from the pre-existent religions of the Bangla people. Now, whether you want to call it religion, Jukurpa, spirituality, this is beyond my ken. I mean, that maybe Rabbi Riesenberg can talk about. But the point of the matter is that there is a lot of spirituality within this dictionary. When I visited Leipzig, where the Lutheran mission that was originally from Dresden moved to, I asked about Clamor Wilhelm Schumann, and they told me, oh, yeah, he was a zero, meaning he did not manage to Lutheranize even one Aboriginal person. L'irfua, we say in Hebrew, l'irfua, like for medicine, meaning not even one. And then I told them, but look, the guy wrote down the dictionary of Bangla. He participated in the writing down of the dictionary of Ghana, which is the Adelaide language. He's not a zero, he is a hero. And in fact, nowadays, if you go to the Leipzig Lutheran Mission, which is a successor of the Dresden Lutheran Mission, you will see that Schumann and three others, Klose, Meyer, and Teilchemann, they are actually embraced and championed by the Lutherans. So this is one beautiful story of how a Christian and a Jew, one is Schumann, one is Zuckermann, kind of collaborate with each other without even knowing each other. I've visited the place where he was born, Osnabrück. In fact, Bissendorf, it's a village near Osnabrück. The other beautiful connection between Christians and Jews is, as you perspicaciously spoke about William Cooper, you have actually added important knowledge to me, David, about the First World War casualty, who was William Cooper's son. So in other words, it kind of tells you what I always believe in, multiple causation. So in anything, there is multiple causation. Why I resigned recently from the University of Adelaide, there is multiple causation. Why he protested against Kristallnacht, multiple causation. First, as you said, he had a son killed by the Germans. He was frightened that the Germans were after him, after all. The other one is, and we should not kind of minimize it, he was an indigenous person caring about another indigenous people, namely the Jewish people. I checked my DNA recently. I'm a Kohen from Israel 3,500 years ago. So this is genetically proven. I have my DNA in Canaan, in Israel, in whatever you want to call it. And he thought, as an Aboriginal man who had been discriminated against, that he should not allow other Aboriginal people, namely the Jewish people, to be discriminated against, whether it's by the Germans, whether it's by the Europeans, whether it's by any other enemy. So this is a beautiful, another story. And the third beautiful story is the reason why I found myself what I'm doing in Adelaide, which is giving Aboriginal people well-being, mental health, spirituality back through the reclamation of their sleeping beauties or dreaming beauties, if you want to correspond with Jukurpa, dream time. It's a mistranslation, but it doesn't matter. We know it as dreaming these days. So I call Aboriginal languages which have been killed, 97% of languages were killed. So out of 400, only 12 are alive and kicking. I call these languages dreaming beauties. And the reason I do it as an Israeli Jew is simply because of the fascinating and multifaceted story of the, what I call Israeli language. And this is a book that I wrote in Israel, I published in Israel years ago. It's called Israelit Safa Yafa, Israeli, a beautiful language, and it multiplied the number of my enemies / admirers in Israel by a factor of 100,000. And the reason is very simple, and this is how it is all connected to Christianity and Judaism. As you all know, Hebrew was the language of the Jews, a continuation of Canaanite. Canaanite is a Semitic language in Israel, Eretz Israel. And Hebrew is the continuation of that language. Its sister is called Aramaic. Its cousin, which came much later, is called Arabic. And its second cousin or third cousin is called Amharic. So if you go to Ethiopia, you land in Addis Ababa. Now, any Israeli would know the word Chadish. Chadish means new. And Aviv. Aviv means spring. So Tel Aviv is like the hill of spring, the new and the old. This is the name that was given to Alt-Nai land. Alt-Nai, so old, new, but also, as I see it, Alt-Nai, on condition that we understand its complexity, its multiple causation, etc. Now, Hebrew was a language of the Jews. Say the Bible, the Old Testament, was codified somewhere between 1300 BC until 500 BC. So, I mean, I'm not going to talk about when it was codified, etc. But we know that Hebrew was alive in 1000 BC. There is no doubt about it. We know it was alive in 500 BC. However, we also know that Jesus was not a native speaker of Hebrew. He knew Hebrew, of course, but he was not a native speaker of Hebrew. How do I know that he was not a native speaker of Hebrew? Well, it's very simple. He says, Eli, Eli, lama shabbaqtani, God, God, why have you forsaken me? Had he been a native speaker of Hebrew and not Aramaic, he would have said, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani, but he doesn't say azavtani. He said, shabbaqtani, which is Aramaic. He also says, Talitha, umi, young girl, wake up. Had he been a native speaker of Hebrew, he would have said, Na'ara, umi ho, or alma, alma, umi. Alma is a very interesting word because it corresponds with parthenos, and parthenos is a young woman, but also in Greek it means virgin. I mean, and this is kind of the entire thing about the Virgin Mary, etc. Now, coming to Jesus, he spoke Aramaic. He knew Hebrew, he knew Greek, but his mother tongue, his mameloshen, as we say in Yiddish, was Aramaic. In the Mishnah, when the rabbis, like Rabbi Riesenberg, wanted to know the word for broom, broom, they asked the servant to tell them, the woman because of course the upper levels, the upper echelons, they already spoke Aramaic. It was kind of the French, if you want, of like the fin de siècle, or the English today of diplomacy. So only the hoi polloi, the masses, the normies, knew Hebrew. The intelligentsia, the kind of the upper echelons, they did not know Hebrew. They had to ask the seven. Now, 135 AD marks the symbolic end of spoken Hebrew. As you all know, Bar Kokhba was killed in Beitar by the Romans, and he symbolically was the last speaker of Hebrew. Of course, I mean, I was not there. Maybe there were a couple of speakers after him, but it's just a symbol. As you know, Jews were expelled to Iraq, to Mesopotamia, etc., and they ended up, some of them in Italy, in France, and in 1000 AD, they moved to Regensburg, Worms. This is Yiddish, and Yiddish has a lot of Aramaic and Hebrew substrata within it. And Hebrew, as Yiddish, sorry, the Yiddish speakers, they had to escape from Germany to Slavonic speaking countries because of the pandemic. And the pandemic, I'm not talking about the panic that we saw 2 years ago. I'm talking about the bubonic plague, 1347, due to anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is not a new phenomenon. As you know, it's not something that you can find all over the place in the wokest left these days. It is something that existed, pre-existed. The Jews were unfortunately accused of the bubonic Black Death, which killed half of Western Europe. It was much worse than the COVID. And they had to go to Poland or to Slavonic-speaking countries. This is when Yiddish underwent Slavonization. I could talk about that for years. But the important thing is that Eliezer ben Yehuda, who is the hero behind the revival of Hebrew, he was a Yiddish speaker. His Mameloshen was Yiddish. He hated Yiddish because Yiddish reminded him of the persecuted Jew of the diaspora, in quotation marks, the homosexual, feminine, weak, feeble-minded, religious, all in quotation marks. These are not this is not my perspective, of course. The one with the yake, with the jacket, the orderly one. Zionism at the time was Dionysian. It was anti-Apollonian. We need to be on our own. And in order to be on our own, we need three components. A Trinity, not il Padre, il Figlio e lo Spirito Santo, not that Trinity. The Trinity was language, land, territory, and lens, as in cultural lens, cultural heritage. And of course, we had the cultural lens. My great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather said, Bashana Haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. So the lens was there. We don't need to prove that Jews have maintained their cultural identity, regardless of what you consider the most important Jewish component. I mean, for me, the most important Jewish component is Menschlichkeit, so to be a Mensch, like Ubuntu in South Africa. And on the one hand, on the other hand, on the third hand, on the fourth hand, on the fifth hand, so Jewish way of thinking. As you all know, Fiddler on the Roof, there is a beautiful scene there when Hordel tells Tevye that she was going to marry Perchik, who is a Bolshevik, an atheist. And Tevye is so disappointed because he is a religious Jew, an ultra-Orthodox. And he asked her, why are you doing it to me? And she says, I love him. He loves me. And then Tevye reckons, and in my view, it's the succinct description of Jewishness. Love, it's a new style. On the other hand, our old ways were once new, weren't they? On the other hand, they decided without parents, without a matchmaker. On the other hand, did Adam and Eve have a matchmaker? On the other hand, yes, they did. And it seems that these two have the same matchmaker, and he looks at heaven, like he looks at God. This is for me the epitome of Jewishness. Now, finishing my presentation today, because I know that we are short in time. When Eliezer ben Yehuda comes to Israel, he is not a linguist. He's not a linguistician. He's a political scientist. He understands that he needs lang as a unifying tongue. He needs land as a territory where you can be Jewish easily without the caprices of anti-Semitism, whether it's leftist, wokist anti-Semitism, whether it's right-wing, the Heil Hitler type of anti-Semitism, and of course, lands that we had. Now, he understands the importance of a unifying tongue. And the question is, why not Yiddish? Why not German? Why not English? Why not French? Why not Aramaic? Well, he says Hebrew is the best candidate because the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible, is written mostly in Hebrew. As you know, the book of Daniel is written in Aramaic. Itamar ben Avi, so Itamar, the son of Eliezer ben Yehuda, is the first symbolic speaker of Israeli in 1886. Israeli, on the one hand, is a phoenix rising from the ashes, that's Hebrew. On the other hand, it's a cuckoo laying its eggs in the nest of another bird, tricking it to believe that it is its own offspring. That's Yiddish. Israeli is full of Yiddish without Israelis noticing that. And only Yiddish speakers, or only linguists who know Yiddish, are able to tell you there's so many components of Yiddish within Israeli. Now, Israeli, of course, is also a magpie, stealing, as we know in Australia, from Arabic. Almost all the curses, the swear words in Israeli are Arabic. Almost all. Like in Ukrainian, almost all the swear words are Russian. That's a fact of life. And Israeli steals from American these days, because American is the world's language, as American English. But when I came to Australia, and let me ask, David, how many minutes am I left with?
3 or 4.
Excellent. When I came to Australia, which was 20 years ago, not Nunbet, Nunbet means 42. I only came Kaf. You know, in Hebrew, we have gematria. Gematria is very important, like nichnas yain yatsa sod. So entered wine, got out secret, because yain, the gematric value of yain is 70, and also the gematric value of sod is 70. So it must be true. In vino veritas, as they say. When you drink wine, you tell the truth. When I arrived here 20 years ago, I said to myself, what can I, an Israeli Jew, do in order to give back to the society that is so welcoming? That was in Melbourne. And I said to myself, what are the 2 greatest problems of Australia? The first problem, of course, is that Australia is neither an aristocracy nor a democracy. It's a bureaucracy. It is run by bureaucrats. I need to fill a form every day, at least one form every day. It's crazy. But what can I, an Israeli Jew, help do against bureaucracy? I can only swallow the bitter pill, which I'm doing every day. The other problem of Australia, absolutely the Aboriginal plight, the Aboriginal history. But I'm not a dentist, so I cannot give my Aboriginal friends teeth. Some of them do not have teeth. I'm not a psychologist, so I cannot get my Aboriginal friends out of smoking through an anti-smoking therapy or something. I'm a linguist. And I have been an expert of the Hebrew revival to the extent that I know in advance what is revivable and what is unrevivable. I know how to be efficient when I revive languages. This is a skill or a knowledge or a talent or whatever you want to call it, a body of knowledge, which is so important. And this is when I decided to establish revivalistics, that was in the macro, to find a specific tribe that had lost its language, Bangala, and as well as Bayungu in Western Australia, that is in the micro. And the last thing, which is in the mukro, muk means massive open online course, MOOC, MOOC, was to establish a course which is free of charge for anybody in the world, which is called Saving Languages, Reviving Languages all over the world. So I have had 20,000 students. Some of them are Yazidis. As you know, they were totally exterminated and linguicided. Some of them are Namibians. In fact, I have had students from 190 countries, 190. So, I mean, it's almost all countries in the world. So this is how a Jew from Israel can help Australian society, or can try to contribute towards well-being, towards the resurrection of intellectual sovereignty, cultural autonomy, spirituality, the resurrection of the soul, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, of so many Aboriginal people who are kind of falling in between the chairs. They're neither Aboriginal, they do not have a command of their Aboriginal language, for example, nor white fellows. So, I mean, the integration didn't work as far as I can tell. Well, it was a pleasure to address you. I would be very happy to open the floor for questions, complaints, anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghil'ad, and we'll hand you back to John in a second, but we do so appreciate that you've targeted something that you can give back into Australia to build something that has been broken. It's just beautiful. So thank you very much, and know that you're much loved in this room.
Thank you, Ghil'ad. Wonderful, great, and I'm sure hopefully we'll get some time towards the end of the program for some Q&A, and if people have got questions, we would ask you to just raise your hand on the reactions button, and we'll come to you as time permits to answer questions. But I'm really encouraged with what you do and what you have brought into this country and brought back. You'll be interested next month where we have Dr. Cherie Trotter as one of our guest speakers, who is one of the founders of the Indigenous Embassy in Israel, who's a Maori Indigenous person, and is working towards proving that the Jew is indigenous to the land of Israel, which is a very important legal point at this particular point of time. But for tonight, just say thank you at this time, and you have brought some knowledge, given us some questions to ask, and we hope to hear more. So it's great. Thank you very much indeed. Now I want to just pass to a couple of our very dear friends who have just returned from Israel, and that is Janine Rankin and Joy Halen, who have been constant goers backwards and forwards to Israel. And we just wanted to get a few minutes with them before we pass to our next guest, who is a man on the ground. So Joy, over to you. You want to go first, or Janine go first?
No, Janine go first, I thought, and then I'm introducing Doron.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how do I speak after that talk? My simple little story, but anyway, I haven't got long, so I will sort of go straight into it. That earlier this year, I was at the Jewish library and was about to sit down next to a couple, and I turned to them and said, "Are you Jewish?" Just to check. And they said, yes. And I said, well, can I say, as an Australian non-Jewish person, how shocked and disturbed I was with the massacre? And he just put his head down, and his wife said, "You don't know what that means to him." And I thought, all I've said is that. So it made me start to realize a little bit of what the Jewish people are feeling. And so I was thinking of going to Israel, and one morning I particularly got upset with the news, and I thought, we can pray, we can send money, but we've got to take action. So I decided I would go with Joy, and we flew together, which we don't usually do, but we did. But But before that, just to go back, I decided I would make a little postcard that I could give to the Jewish people, something that they've got in their hand that lets them know that we love them and care about them. So I'm holding up this postcard, which you probably can't see properly, but it's just got the koala, the dove, and it says, Israel High, which, as you know, means Israel, the nation of Israel lives. So, and that was really taken from the song, that new song that came out after the massacre. So I decided I'll maybe do 200, and then I really felt to take 500. So we went off with 500 of these postcards, and I just really, I started giving them out even on the plane and at the airport, and just as every day when we went out, I would give them to soldiers, border police. One time we were going up to the bus stop and I saw a border police and said, Bogotov, good morning. Gave him the card. He just had a huge smile and just put his hand on his heart. And many of the reactions were tears. They couldn't believe that we came from Australia. And so everywhere I went, basically, to Yad Vashem, when I went there were hundreds of soldiers. So I just was going, through them and saying, I'm Israel High, giving out postcards. And I met the Golani Brigade, or a Golani Brigade, and was able to talk to them and let them know that we love them and we care about them. And one of them, I only had one card left at this time, so one of the soldiers said platypus, koala and kangaroo, and I thought, well, he knows what a platypus is, so gave him the card. But it was just amazing how, all I wanted to do was, as it says in Isaiah 40, verse 1, comfort my people. I know many of you have been over there, you've done wonderful things, volunteered, but this was just a simple thing that we were able to go wherever we went. And on Yom HaZikaron, we went to an event, and which was, it was just heartbreaking. We heard from the hostage,
Mother.
Sorry?
The mother of the hostage.
The mother, Rabbi Reisenberg, spoke about him. I can't remember his name. And she was speaking, and she actually said that she was glad that he was killed by the IDF and not Hamas. She was an amazing woman. And we heard from widows and even a recording of children talking about what it was like for them. So it was very heartbreaking. And the next day was Independence Day, and a few of us went up to the Kotel and spoke to 3 groups of young women. One group had lost friends at the Nova site. They were murdered. But it was the joy of that occasion was amazing. So there was dancing, there was singing, and I was getting a bit tired, I must say, ready to go home. And then all of a sudden they were dancing and we were grabbed and we were jumping up and down singing Om Israel High, which was probably the most exciting time, just to be in there with all these people, with the flags. The Jewish people are just incredible. I just kept saying, everywhere we went, like I said, on the buses, we would give out the cards, we would talk to the Jewish people, let them know how much we love them, and they were amazed that we came from Australia, and they think that the world hates them. And I told them that we have 40 plus organisations in Australia, and that there's people in every country that love them and are praying for them. So then there was Yom Yerushalayim, and that day was amazing. 4 hours of watching the families, the people just walking past with all their banners, and so joyous, all sorts of banners. And so banners with the third temple on them and all sorts of things. We also did a tour down to Kfar Aza, where we had an hour and a half tour of there where there were 80 people murdered, and that was shocking, of course. And we saw a whole street where the houses had been destroyed. There was a house that was open where you could go in. I thought, I don't really want to go in, but above the house, it had the family welcome you into this house. So we went in there. I think I left a postcard in there too. It was just, I still think about it now, and it is so much that we saw and that, that we did, that you sort of keep reflecting on it, and we also went to the Nova site, and, I gave out some postcards there to some people I didn't even speak to, just gave them the card. But on the tour at Kfar Aza, at the end of the tour, I actually spoke to our guide, Ralph, gave him a card, and he just had a smile on his face. And that was just what I was hoping, that people would just see that there are people around the world who care. And he was coming out to Australia to visit his daughter, so that was a happy time for him. Many opportunities. So I've just got a couple of minutes, I think. Joy, is that right? Just Temple Mount. Sorry, going up Temple Mount. Yes, gave them soldiers there. Sometimes people had tears in their eyes, and then I would have tears in my eyes. But one thing I noticed. One time I ended up having lunch with two lovely Jewish women. One was waiting for her fiance to come back from Gaza. And we met soldiers who had come back to City of David, near where we live over there. Beautiful young men, but it's just it's tragic. But one thing I wanted to say, that just to sort of finish, I know it probably sounds a strange story, but one time I was in the City of David, and there was a little boy by himself with his kippah on, and I didn't have a card to give him, but I had a little koala bear. So I said to him, "Would you like a koala?" And he just looked at me. He said, "No." And I said, "Wouldn't you like a koala bear?" And he said, "No." And he just looked at me, and I thought, I couldn't imagine why. And then later on, I realized that where he walks, there's Arabs going down there as well. And I just realized, no, he's been told you cannot accept. I'm thinking that you cannot accept anything from anybody when you are walking around by yourself. So it was an amazing time, and I think it was very different from other times that we've gone there, but I'm still glad that I went. I felt like it just brought a smile to people's faces, and it was just a simple thing to do. And I felt that that's what we were called to do. So thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Over to you, Joy.
Well, yes, for me, and I'll be quick, I was glad I was with such a positive person, actually, because I was more on the sad and the serious time, and wondered how really you can be happy when we know there's hostages still in Gaza and soldiers being killed on a daily basis, and some of them the most precious of all Israelis. Correct me if I'm wrong, Doron, but I think 80% of the IDF is made up of boys from the settlements. And I call them the cream of Israelis, really. So, yes, Janine kept me on the up and up, and Shabbat, of course, with the Mount of Olives as our backdrop, living in the City of David as we do. Location for us, really, and a great privilege and honor that we're able to stay there. So anybody welcome to come. Yes, there's always room. But look, I might just hand over to Doron. I don't want to, Doron, I don't want to take away from his time. And you look as in, if you're on location, Doron, are you in that Humpy? And can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh,
Trying
good,
to-
good. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
I
hear
think somebody's
you.
unmuted me. Okay.
All
okay.
right. Yep. So Doron, you would know from the flyer, is an international speaker and IDF veteran, a security expert, and involved in so many projects, Doron, that I thought I'd just let you introduce yourself. Tell us what you've been up to. I know from October the 7th, you've really been on duty, leaving a wife and 3 children at home. And goodness knows how it is for them, as well as yourself. But also involved in Cry for Zion, Third Temple restoration. And if you could let us know, Doron, how we back here can help. As Janine said, we apologise for our nation, that our leaders in particular have not been more determined to combat the anti-Semitism that's here. But we do have some pushback with the Never Again Now rallies. But I know soldiers are still in need of equipment. I see Facebook please, but of course we don't know if they're credible sites or what. So if you could just let us know if we can do anything to help back here. Over to you, Doron.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on this forum. I can't see everyone who's connected right now. Right now, hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm actually in a forward operating base here on my Hummer here, where we carry out missions on the daily in the Gaza Strip. Are we good? Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. So apologies for a bunch of noises. This is an active base that I'm in right now. Right now we have a few minutes. Literally, we're getting ready for our next mission here for the day. But in any which case, so as you said, my background is in, before the war started, is in Temple Mount advocacy. I started a nonprofit called Cry for Zion, to where we raise awareness about the importance of the Temple Mount for both the past, the present, and the future of this important location in God's eyes, through Scripture and through the end time unfolding of the events that will take place on this very important location, and the conflict that is happening over this location. In fact, the war, when it started, for a lot of people who are not aware, Hamas's main objective, one of Hamas's main objective that we found out when we collected the intelligence off of the bodies of the terrorists that we killed, that were on their way, on their mission to carry out the continuation of their mission, was actually to get to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, to create a uprising amongst the Muslim Arabs living in Israel by basically declaring war from the Temple Mount, saying, we have conquered the Temple Mount. Join us, brothers. Let's conquer the rest of Israel. So just so you understand, if this is how the enemy sees this place and understands the importance of this place, then my question is, how come is it that Christians do not understand the importance of this place? Islam understands the sensitivity and the importance of the Temple Mount, that this is where God's throne is on earth. This is where the Messiah will reign and rule from here on earth, and will execute God's judgment in the earth, right? This is what Scripture says. And unfortunately, because of not very strong Christian theology on the Temple Mount, there's been this confusion that it belongs to the Antichrist and that this is his place, when it's absolutely the other way around. God says, this is my footstool. This is where my eyes are continuously. This is going to be the highest place, the joy of the whole earth, right? This is how God sees this holy place. Jesus said, right, when he chased out the money changers, he says, do you not know that my Father's house is a house of prayer for all nations? In other words, Jesus himself was alluding to that even where the Gentiles were, where the Gentiles were, or essentially where the money changing was happening, essentially this is where the court of Gentiles is the assumption, right? Because that's the context. It's not that they were changing money, because the money needed to be changed and converted into temple currency, right? So that's a must for worshiping in the temple. This is the way God created it. So that wasn't the problem. If you pay attention to the context is essentially, why are you making it also, are you infringing into the space of where the Gentiles are supposed to be worshiping God and focusing on temple service, not on money exchange, right? So this is the way I understand the passage in the New Testament. This is the way I understand Jesus's zeal for God's house, because that's also what the apostles then remembered the passage in Scripture. It says that zeal for your house consumes me. So if this is something that is important to the Messiah, why is it not important to the followers of Messiah? And the way I understand it, it's real simple, is essentially because, like I just pointed out, this is an important place to God. The enemy knows it, and he wants to do everything in his power to avoid those of us who can exercise God's will in this place, and by causing confusion, causing misinformation, right? And then allowing those who are the enemies of God to defile this place, to ruin it, to take control over it, and to prevent from God's people worshiping on the Temple Mount. So that's just to give you a very short version of why we started Cry for Zion, because we realize that this is an area of ignorance in the church, and that we need to help educate the church about the very importance of this place and how it plays into the end times fulfillment of the end time unfolding of God's plan here in Israel. So that's what we saw in October 7th, is that the enemy understands very well the importance of this place. This is what fueled the terrorist activities in all the South here, in all the communities, and the slaughtering of the Jews here, because they were fueled with this hatred and the prevention of Jews going to defile the Temple Mount with their prayers. As they say, defile it with their feet on the Temple Mount. Their plan failed. Thank God we were able to prevent them from reaching Jerusalem. We prevented them from fulfilling that part of their plan, which could have caused a very, very huge uprising, Islamic uprising within Israel. That's also why the IDF had units positioned, a very big forces positioned in Judea, Samaria, to prevent that very uprising, because we already had intel on that ahead of time. And that's why many forces were there. But at the same time, there was also intelligence failure, or not intelligence failure, but execution of plans based on the intelligence that we had, and forces were sent to Judea, Samaria to squelch any attempted uprising on the day of October 7th that was gathered from the intel that there was going to be some attempts to do that. My unit has been called up since October 7th. We were called up on the because we're a quick reaction force, so we got called up immediately. We were ready to execute the plans of our unit. So we've been here since October 7th, fighting continuously for, was it over 9 months now? Yeah, so if you have any questions, I mean, that's essentially what we've been doing since October 7th. We've been in all the areas of the Gaza Strip, is where our objectives are, because there are missions in the north with Hezbollah in the north. We have many missions in Judea, Samaria, like I pointed out, and we have missions in the Gaza Strip, which is, so the two main fronts essentially is the Gaza Strip in the north, but there's also central Israel in Judea and Samaria. So that's more or less where the military activities have been taking place. And what I can speak on is our missions and what we've been doing and conducting here in the Gaza Strip. That's what I can share on. Of course, I can't share all the sensitive information, but things that are unsensitive, I can share on. And as far as needs, like you were talking about, there are ongoing needs, especially for units like mine, who have been active since the first day. For example, the uniform that I'm wearing, this is a new uniform that I just got from the company that we have been purchasing uniforms from. And this is actually a tryout uniform. I'm trying it out in the field. It's a summer uniform. But otherwise, most of the guys don't have this. They have what we purchased during the winter and through the fundraising that I did through Cry for Zion. So basically, we're using our nonprofit in the United States, the 501c3, to raise funds for the military. And we're doing it. It's a very sensitive way that you do it, because basically, if I purchase certain gear, then I'm infringing on certain laws of what I'm allowed to and not allowed to as a nonprofit. So what I'm able to do is, for example, purchase uniforms and certain gear, boots, things that wear out like that, but I can't buy what's called war material. And that's what we've been doing. And you can only imagine that after 9 months of fighting, that uniforms get torn, boots get worn out, and those are the kind of things that are needed to being recycled. And these are things that the military does not issue for reservists. The young soldiers, the enlisted soldiers, they get those types of gears. But again, because we're enlisted, we're only here for a short period of time. The military can't afford. Well, it's political, of course, cannot. But that's what we're being told, is that they can't afford to issue us the type of gear that we need. Of things like that, for example, proper boots, proper uniform, proper combat vests, proper ballistic helmets, goggles. We're a mobile unit, so if you've ever seen pictures of, let's say, the SAS with their vehicles out in the desert, so that's the kind of operations we do. It's open vehicles like you can see here, and we get all that dust of Gaza in our eyes, in our lungs. It makes us sick. It makes us, it wears us out, of course, etc. So things like that is what helps us, is being able to get proper goggles, proper ballistic helmets, which again, like I said, can be tricky, but little things like that help, of course, the guys here to continue their missions and doing it comfortably and effectively, and so on. So that's a little bit of what we've been doing through our nonprofit and helping with the war effort here for the soldiers.
Can you tell us, Doron, what morale is actually like? Because after 9 months, we know soldiers must be very, very weary. But of course, we're also hearing criticism of your upper echelons, of the military. They're going back to October the 7th. But even now, what's the confidence in your generals and, commanders?
Well, I'll put it like, that's a good question. So that also goes into what I just mentioned here, the issue of getting getting gear outside of the military. So when I started, while fighting, trying to fundraise and explain to people what we need right from the field here. So it's not like I'm sitting in an office and making mail outs and videos and all this stuff. When we started that, we had a boost in support, and we were able to get a bunch of gear for guys. So you can look at it from this perspective, right? So it's like, hey, we love you, we're with you, we support you. And then as the war drug out, people forgot about us. And how do I know that people forget about you? Because people stop giving, right? They stop supporting, and they forget that, just like, for example, part of our mission objectives is making sure that the guys who are fighting in Gaza, that they get the fuel for the tanks that are carrying out missions. If I don't bring them the fuel, then I forgot about them, right? If I don't bring them more not cannons, but the shelling and whatever, the shells for the tanks and so on. That's like, I forgot about the guy, but he's there, right? And hey, but we're with you, right? Because we brought you. You remember a few months ago we brought you the cannons you need, the fuel you need. You know, we're with you. But the guy's like, but hey, I haven't been able to run my tank in 2 months. So it feels kind of like that, right? It's like, you know, we're with you, and you get a boost of support, and guys are excited, they're blessed, and they're very thankful, of course, because they know that it's from the generosity of people that don't owe us anything, really. But then they look to me and say, hey, Doron, what about so-and-so that with boots? You know, the new guys are coming in because we recruiting new guys that need to recycle guys that have been wounded and hurt, whatever, and they come in without a kit at all. They don't have anything. And so it's like, I can't get them boots and I can't get them a uniform, you know, like the rest of the guys that were with me from the beginning. And so the feeling is a little bit daunting, right? And it's like you're trying to keep your morale up, but knowing that those who have been supporting us, and this isn't talking about, of course, you guys at all, right? I'm talking about people who've known of us and have been following and supporting our ministry for many years. It feels a little disappointing. It's like I can't even meet basic needs, let alone you know, operational costs. We were able to fundraise and get a vehicle, a pickup truck, and that pickup truck is parked right in front of me, actually, as I'm speaking to you. It's been meeting the needs of the unit for transportation and logistics that are outside the military responsibility per our unit. But I need to pay for diesel for the truck. The diesel is extremely expensive in Israel. I don't know what it is in Australia, but here it's 2 shekels more, 2 to 3 shekels more than regular petrol. So just managing costs, right?
Yeah.
Sorry,
good.
that's another things like that, right? That they're ongoing because this war is ongoing, and these are things that I'm that's on my shoulders, right? That I have to put out of my costs, out of my personal costs of the subsidized salary that I'm getting as a reservist, right? So I'm not getting my full salary. I'll give you an example. If I were working in the security work and I were doing the full time that I work, I get, let's say, 20,000 shekels, for example. In my subsidized salary, I get something like 8,000 shekels. So you can only imagine, right, that I have to now balance all of my you know, electric bills and rent costs for my home and groceries, etc., all the normal needs at home with that subsidized salary. That's not fun either. So a bunch of different things like that will wear out. You know, it wears out the guys. It wears us out mentally. We have to put out of our own pockets from a subsidized salary. You don't get a full salary while you're here. So you have your concerns at home. You have your wife at home who's dealing with dental issues and medical issues with your kids and school, and kids are arguing with mom. They're giving you a hard time, mom a hard time. Dad has to call home and have to straighten out the kids through a conversation on the phone. All these things are weighing on us as the war continues. There are men who have businesses, right? So I give you an example of somebody who's working who doesn't own a business. Someone who owns a business, they can't operate that business in full capacity. So they're operating on, let's say, 50% capacity while managing their business from here, right? From during your downtime, managing paychecks and costs and overhead and this and that. So all of that is weighing on us while we need to have our mind focused on the missions ahead, on getting the jeeps ready and so on and so forth. So it's very, 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 very difficult, to put it very plainly. But the guys I'm with, you know, the morale, we're trying to keep the morale high. We have our humor that's keeping us afloat, so to speak. And we're trying to do our best with what we have. And that's just the reality. That's just the way it is in a war that's ongoing.
Thank you, Doron. Wonderful. Great to see you. And just to touch base with you, and thank you, Joy, for the introduction to Doron and the people on the ground. And we get to see some of the issues that people probably don't think about on an ongoing basis. And with that in mind, I've asked David to put up the Bathsheba bank account for some giving so that we can pass it back to you for some of the things that are doing, and to let other people know that we're working towards with the rabbi a foundation where people will be able to give to support many of the Israeli on the ground people, which is very important, as you have said, Doron. You know, like we just don't think about the the diesel cost, or the Jeep to get backwards and forwards, or all the sacrifices that you guys have made to get your 8,000 shekels instead of your 20,000 shekels. And I'd like to spend some more time with you, talking with you at some stage, and to I don't know if you know one of our good friends, Major Daniel Jacob, who's IDF reservist, etc., but to connect you guys so that we can all work with you to support you and to give to you and look after your families, because that's one of the great things that we can do from outside resources that we can't do because we're not there with you day by day, hand by hand, etc. So I just encourage everybody, if you can, I don't often ask for, in fact, I don't ever ask for donations or gifts, but if God puts it on your heart that you can give, I think David's put it up there to Bathsheba account at the moment, and we'll pass that on and give to you. So it's wonderful to have you with us. I'm so pleased
Much appreciated.
that you're there, and we're going to pray and put you on, if it's okay, we'll put you on our prayer list for you and your family, and for all the soldiers that you work with, walk with, support and encourage. So just it's a wonderful time. Ghil'ad and Doron, we get fantastic support from you guys. So we just want to say thank you so much. We could spend hours talking with you, and on Sunday afternoons I run a little event which I'll invite you both to come on at some stage, where we can spend an hour or more with you. But tonight it's like we get a taste of what you do. We get a taste of how we can support you, and we're going to be walking with you, praying with you and for you and your families in the forthcoming times that are coming. So I'm sorry we didn't have time for Q&A tonight, but we will get another chance. We've got more events coming up, and so I'm just going to close out tonight with saying thank you so much for your amazing testimonies and stories, and for the gifts that you give us, and pass to the rabbi to close out the meeting.
Look, not much more I could add to the thanks that you've given, but Doron, certainly our heartfelt thanks for your sacrifices on behalf of the Jewish people, and also the important work that you're doing of sharing the true history of the Temple Mount. This Friday, actually, in my Latin class, I'll be doing a session on the significance of the temple, and certainly it's the same Zoom as now at 10 o'clock. Please join us if you want to get a more in-depth knowledge about the temple and the Temple Mount vis-a-vis the current 3-week period of mourning in the Jewish calendar. Ghil'ad, Professor Zuckermann, I think we could probably talk the whole night about the history of Yiddish and Aramaic and Hebrew that you've touched upon. But let me leave you with this wonderful story of Isaac Bashevis Singer, who a very well-known Yiddish writer who actually won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1978 for Yiddish literature. And he got up and he said in Yiddish, Menschen fragen me, was schreibe ich in Yiddish? It's a teute Sprach. He says, people ask me, what do you write in Yiddish for? It's a dead language. And he said, we have a tradition that there will come a time when the Mashiach will come. And after then there'll be the resurrection of the dead, and there'll be millions and millions of Yiddish speakers asking, what's new to read in Yiddish? I write for that day. And really finally, to you, Janine, my dear friend, the cards that you give to people, you think they don't have an effect. A colleague of mine was just in Israel, and he went to Hadassah Hospital, and naturally, unfortunately, he met a number of soldiers there, and one soldier in particular he engaged in a conversation. He's been serving in Gaza throughout this whole time, and he's been wounded once, he's been wounded a second time, and he's going back, and my colleague asked him, what inspires you? And he says, what inspires me? And he goes to the drawer and takes out a letter of a girl, a schoolgirl in Florida. And it's addressed, Dear Israeli Soldier, my whole class is writing to each and every one of you. I want to thank you. I pray for you every day. I wish you much success. Brenda Platt. She gives me strength. And he said, Rabbi, can you please find out who is this Brenda Platt? I want to talk to her. And, it's not hard today to connect with people, particularly in the Jewish community. Found out she's a schoolgirl in Hollywood in Florida, and that her whole class wrote this letter. And her letter, he called it to thank her, that your letter, your prayers, they inspire me. And I think we shouldn't underestimate what we can do, certainly as John said, with our charity, our tzedakah, and helping with our prayers and with our good deeds. They all have a ripple effect. So good night and thank you.
Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
Look forward
Am
to
Yisrael
seeing
Chai.
you in a month on the 27th. And for those who can join us Friday, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time for Lantern. If you haven't got the link, please write to us. But we're just so blessed to have you from across the land, from the north to the south, to the east, to the west. Shalom, blessings, good night.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you.
I'm Israel High.
Shalom.